What if the most dangerous thing you ever did was feed a stranger? Tiana Ross thought she was just being a good person, but in the eyes of the United States government, she had just become a person of interest. It was 5 in the morning, and the only sound in the apartment was the radiator hissing. Tiana stood in front of the cracked bathroom mirror, fighting a losing battle with her hair. She pulled the cheap plastic comb through her thick coils and snap. Another tooth broke off, flying into the sink. She sighed, staring at her reflection. Tired eyes, dark circles. 26 years old, and she looked like she had lived 100. Then it happened. A fist pounded on her front door so hard the pictures on the wall rattled. Boom, boom, boom. Tiana froze. Her first thought was the landlord, then the police. In her neighborhood, a knock like that at this hour never meant good news. She tiptoed to the door, heart hammering against her ribs, and pressed her eye to the peephole. She expected badges. She expected eviction papers. She did not expect this. 4 men stood in the hallway. Not police, military, full-dress blues, gold buttons shining under the flickering hallway light, medals stacked on their chests. A colonel stood front and center, his face made of stone. Tiana opened the door with trembling hands. "Miss Tiana Ross," the colonel asked. His voice was not a question, it was a command. "Yes," she whispered. "We have orders to secure you. You need to come with us immediately." Secure her. The words hit her like a physical blow. Secure her like she was a weapon or a threat. Was this about her student loans? Was this about the medical debt she stopped paying to buy insulin for her mother? "I do not understand," Tiana stammered, stepping back. "We do not have time for explanations, ma'am." The colonel signaled, and 2 officers stepped forward. Tiana felt the eyes of her neighbors burning into her back as she was escorted down the hallway. Mrs. Jenkins from apartment 4B cracked her door open, watching with that mix of pity and suspicion that Tiana knew too well. She was being taken away, and she had no idea why. 2 days before the military officers arrived, the morning routine was the same as it had been for 6 months. The Chicago wind whipped around the corner of the Sterling Medical Solutions building, cutting through Tiana Ross' thin coat like a razor blade. She pulled her scarf tighter and pushed through the revolving glass doors. The warmth of the lobby hit her face, but it did not reach her bones. She checked the wall clock. 6:10 in the morning. She had exactly 20 minutes before her shift as a medical coder began. Just enough time. She walked straight to the company cafeteria. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a pale, sickly glow on the few early risers hunched over their coffees. Tiana did the math in her head as she grabbed a tray. She had $40 left in her checking account until Friday. Rent was due in 3 days, but she did not hesitate. She reached for 2 pre-packaged turkey sandwiches and a bottle of warm water. The total came to $7.50 with her employee discount. It was a small amount to some, but to Tiana it was the difference between keeping the lights on or sitting in the dark. She swiped her badge. The cashier, a woman named Brenda, who had worked there for 20 years, watched her with narrow eyes. "You eating 2 lunches today, Tiana?" she asked, snapping gum. "Hungry morning." Tiana just forced a smile and took the receipt. "I have a fast metabolism, Brenda." She walked out the side exit into the gray dawn. The bus stop was just around the corner, a metal shelter that offered no real protection from the elements. Elias was there. He always was. He sat on the edge of the bench, a heap of mismatched layers and old wool. He was not moving. For a second, panic seized Tiana's chest. She hurried over her boots, crunching on the salt and gravel. "Elias." The old man raised his head slowly. His eyes were milky with cataracts, but they cleared when he saw her. He did not smile, he rarely did, but his shoulders relaxed. "You are late, girl," he rasped. His voice sounded like dry leaves scraping together. Tiana sat down next to him, ignoring the wet cold of the metal bench. "I am right on time, old man. Here." She pressed the sandwich and water into his hands. His gloves were fingerless and his knuckles were swollen red from frostbite. Elias looked at the food, then he looked at Tiana. He saw the dark circles under her eyes. He saw the way her coat was fraying at the cuffs. He pulled one sandwich out of the bag and pushed the other one back toward her. You take this one, he said firmly. You are wasting away. I do not need much fuel. I am just sitting. You are working. Tiana pushed his hand back gently. I ate at home, Elias. Big breakfast. Eggs and toast. I am stuffed. It was a lie. Her stomach was an empty pit that ached with a dull throb. She had not eaten a real breakfast in weeks. Elias stared at her for a long moment, trying to read the truth in her face. Finally, he sighed and tucked the sandwich into his coat pocket. You are a stubborn child. You have a good heart. That is dangerous in this city. Tiana checked her phone. 6:28. She jumped up. I have to go, Elias. Stay warm, okay? I will bring soup tomorrow. She turned and ran. She sprinted across the icy pavement, her breath burning in her lungs. She hit the side door at 6:32. 2 minutes. Just 2 minutes late. She reached for her badge to swipe in, but the light on the reader was already solid red. It did not beep. It just stayed red. The door hissed open, but not because of her badge. Derek Sterling stood in the doorway, filling the frame with his expensive gray suit and the smell of heavy cologne. He was the floor manager, a man who had inherited his position and treated the office like his personal kingdom. He looked at his Rolex, then down at Tiana. You are late, Miss Ross. Tiana tried to catch her breath. I am so sorry, Derek. The side door was stuck and I had to. Derek held up a perfectly manicured hand, silencing her. Stop. I do not care about the 2 minutes, Tiana. I care about the theft. The lobby was filling up with employees arriving for the day. Heads turned. The quiet murmur of morning conversation died down. Tiana felt the blood drain from her face. Theft. I do not understand. I have never stolen anything. Derek stepped closer, invading her personal space. He pulled a tablet from under his arm and tapped the screen. We pulled the cafeteria logs. Every morning for 6 months you purchased 2 meals using the employee discount code. Company policy clearly states that the discount is for employee consumption on premises only. Subsidized nutrition to keep our workforce healthy, not to feed the local wildlife. Tiana flinched as if he had slapped her. He is a person, Derek. His name is Elias. Derek laughed, a short, cruel bark of a sound. I do not care what his name is. You are taking company resources and distributing them to a vagrant. That is benefits fraud. You are effectively stealing money from this company to play charity worker. Tiana looked around. Her co-workers were watching. Some looked away in embarrassment. Others watched with open curiosity. Are you serious? Tiana asked, her voice trembling. It is a sandwich. I paid for it with my own money. It is the principle, Derek sneered. His voice rose, echoing off the marble floors. It shows a fundamental lack of judgment, a lack of character, and frankly, it confirms exactly what I already knew about you. He looked her up and down, his eyes lingering on her worn coat and scuffed boots with open disgust. People like you. You always try to game the system. You think the rules do not apply to you. You think if you cry a sob story, you can take whatever you want. Well, not on my watch. Not at my father's company. He reached out and snatched the badge from her hand before she could pull away. You are fired, Tiana. Effective immediately. Security will box up your personal effects and mail them to you. Do not set foot in this building again, or I will have you arrested for trespassing. Derek turned his back on her and walked toward the elevators, leaving Tiana standing alone in the center of the lobby. The silence was deafening. She felt small. She felt naked. She looked at the glass doors, where she could still see the bus stop in the distance. She had lost her livelihood for $7.50. She swallowed the lump in her throat, squared her shoulders, and walked back out into the cold. The apartment smelled like expensive lavender candles and Chardonnay. It was a warm, suffocating scent that hit Tiana the moment she unlocked the front door. She stepped inside, shivering as the melting snow from her boots dripped onto the polished hardwood floor. She had walked 3 miles because she could not bear to spend the bus fare. Her face was numb and her hands were shaking, but the physical cold was nothing compared to the chill in the living room. Jessica was holding court. Tiana's sister-in-law was sprawled on the beige sectional sofa, wearing a matching yoga set that cost more than Tiana made in a week. 3 other women sat around her. They were all carbon copies of the same upper-middle-class mold. Perfect highlights. Perfect skin, glasses of white wine in hand. They stopped talking the moment Tiana walked in. It was not a respectful silence. It was the kind of silence that falls when the help enters the room. Tiana tried to head straight for the hallway to make herself invisible, but Jessica's voice stopped her cold. "You are home early." It was not a question. It was an accusation. Jessica swirled the wine in her glass, not bothering to look up. "It is barely 10 in the morning, Tiana. Did the buses stop running, or did you finally get escorted out of the building?" The women giggled. A soft, cruel sound that grated on Tiana's nerves. She gripped the strap of her bag tighter. Her knuckles turned white. "I was let go, Jessica." Jessica sighed loudly. She set her glass down on the marble coffee table with a sharp clink. Again. "That is the third time this year, Tiana. Honestly, I do not know how you do it. It is like you are allergic to stability." "I did not lose the job because I was incompetent." Tiana said, her voice low and steady. "I lost it because I helped someone." Jessica rolled her eyes so hard it looked painful. She turned to her friends with a performative look of exhaustion. "You see what I have to deal with. This is exactly what I was talking about. She thinks she is running a charity ward." She turned back to Tiana, her face hardening. "Let me guess. You spent your lunch money feeding one of those addicts on the street again." "He is not an addict," Tiana said. "He is an old man. He was hungry. He is a bum, Tiana. A leech. And frankly, so are you if you cannot hold down a simple data entry job because you are too busy playing savior." Jessica stood up then. She smoothed down her leggings and crossed her arms. She looked at Tiana with the same disappointment she used to show when the housekeeper missed a spot on the floor. Marcus would be so disappointed if he could see you right now. The name hung in the air like a slap. Tiana felt her breath hitch. "Dante, do not bring my brother into this. I will bring him into it because it is his money you are wasting." Jessica snapped. "He worked himself into an early grave to leave that insurance policy. He wanted us to be secure. He wanted you to go to school to build a career. Instead, you are blowing his legacy on sandwiches for people who would rob you as soon as look at you. It is disrespectful, Tiana. It is pathetic." Tiana bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted iron. She wanted to scream. She wanted to tell Jessica that Marcus was the one who taught her to share, that Marcus was the one who would give the shirt off his back to a stranger. But she knew it would not matter. Jessica never really knew Marcus. She only knew the lifestyle his paycheck provided. Jessica took a step closer, her voice dropping to a faux whisper. "Look, since you are already here, we need to talk about the living situation. This arrangement, it is not working for me anymore." Tiana felt the floor drop out from under her. "What are you saying?" "I need the space," Jessica said, shrugging as if she were discussing a dinner menu. "The girls and I were just saying how this apartment has great light, but the flow is all wrong. I need a dedicated space for my practice, a meditation room, a yoga studio. I cannot have that with you hoarding clutter in the second bedroom." "You are kicking me out," Tiana whispered, "for a yoga room." "I am asking you to find your own path," Jessica corrected with a sickly sweet smile. "By the 1st of the month. That gives you a week. Plenty of time for someone so resourceful, right?" Tiana looked at the mantel above the fireplace. There was a framed photo of Marcus in his dress uniform, his arm around Jessica. He looked so proud, so happy. He had no idea that the woman he loved would treat his baby sister like a stray dog the moment he was gone. Tiana looked at his smiling face and swallowed the rage. It burned going down. She would not cry. She would not give Jessica the satisfaction of seeing her break. "Fine," Tiana said. Her voice was ice. "I will be out." She walked past the women who were pretending to examine their manicures and went into her small room. She closed the door and leaned her back against it, sliding down until she hit the floor. The laughter started up again in the living room. It was loud and carefree. Tiana pulled her wallet out of her pocket. She opened it. 2 $20 bills. $40. That was all she had in the world. No job. Oh, no brother. And in 7 days, no home. She stared at the money, and for the first time that day, she felt the true weight of the cold. The $40 felt heavy in her pocket. It was 2 $20 bills, the only barrier between Tiana and complete destitution. She stood in the aisle of the 24-hour pharmacy, staring at the price tag on the bottle of maximum strength cough syrup. $18. It was robbery, plain and simple. If she bought this and the hot soup from the deli, she would have barely enough left for a bus pass. She would be eating plain rice for the rest of the week. But she closed her eyes and she could still hear the sound of Elias coughing yesterday. It was a wet, deep rattle that shook his frail frame so hard his eyes watered. The wind chill was dropping tonight. If she did not do something, pneumonia would take him before the winter was over. Tiana grabbed the bottle. She did not think about her rent. She did not think about Jessica or the eviction notice. She just thought about the old man shivering in the cold. She paid for the medicine and a large container of chicken noodle soup. The steam from the bag warmed her side as she walked the 3 blocks to the bus stop. "Elias, I brought you the good stuff today," she called out, rounding the corner. She forced a cheerfulness into her voice that she did not feel. "I even got you the cherry flavor medicine since you act like a big baby about the regular kind." She stopped. The words died in her throat. The bag slipped from her fingers, hitting the pavement with a wet thud. The plastic container cracked and hot soup spilled out, pooling around her boots. The bench was empty. Not just empty. It was a crime scene. The cardboard box Elias slept on was crushed and soaked in dirty slush. His few belongings were scattered across the sidewalk like garbage. A single shoe, a wet newspaper, and the blanket. The thick blue wool blanket she had given him for Christmas was torn almost in half and snagged on the metal arm of the bench. Tiana stepped closer, her breath hitching in her chest. There on the faded fabric was a stain, dark, rust-colored, drying into a stiff crust. Blood. Panic seized her. She spun around, scanning the street. "Elias." Her voice cracked. "Elias, are you here?" The only answer was the wind howling through the alley. A police cruiser rolled slowly down the street, its lights off. Tiana ran into the road, waving her arms frantically. The car slowed to a halt and the window rolled down. A young officer sat behind the wheel, chewing on a toothpick. He looked at Tiana with bored, tired eyes. "Please, you have to help me," Tiana gasped, leaning down to the window. "The old man who sleeps here. Elias. He is gone. There is blood on his blanket. Did you see anything? Did an ambulance come?" The officer glanced at the empty bench, then back at Tiana. He did not reach for his radio. He did not get out of the car to investigate. He just shrugged. "We did a sweep of the block earlier. Cleared out the vagrants. City council wants the streets clean for the upcoming parade." Tiana felt a cold rage rising in her chest, overpowering her fear. "Clean? You are talking about a human being. He was sick. He was bleeding. Where did you take him? Is he hurt?" The officer rolled his window up halfway, preparing to drive off. "Probably the drunk tank, or the morgue, depending on how lucky he was. Look, lady, do yourself a favor and go home. One less bum on the street is a good day for everyone." He hit the gas, leaving Tiana choking on exhaust fumes. She stood there for a long time, staring at the bloodstain on the blanket. She had failed. She had tried to do one good thing in a world that rewarded cruelty, and she had failed. Tiana walked back to the apartment in a daze. She left the medicine and the spilled soup on the sidewalk. It did not matter anymore. Nothing mattered. Nothing. The system was a machine designed to crush people like Elias, and now it was coming for her. She climbed the stairs to the apartment, her legs feeling like lead. She let herself in quietly, hoping to avoid Jessica, but the apartment was silent. She went into the bathroom and stared at herself in the mirror. She looked broken. She picked up her comb and pulled it through her hair. Snap. Another tooth broke, and then came the sound that would change her life forever. Boom, boom, boom. A fist pounding on the front door. Not the police, not the landlord. Something much worse. Tiana put the comb down and turned toward the hallway. The nightmare was just beginning. The back of the armored vehicle smelled like diesel fuel and gun oil. There were no windows, just reinforced steel walls that vibrated with the low, aggressive hum of the engine. It was a suffocating space designed to transport weapons or prisoners, and right now Tiana felt like both. She sat on the cold metal bench, her hands squeezed tight between her knees to stop them from shaking. Across from her, the colonel sat like a statue carved out of granite. He had not blinked. He had not checked his watch. He just watched her with eyes that were cold and calculating, assessing her threat level. Two other soldiers sat by the rear doors, their rifles resting across their chests, their faces covered by black balaclavas. The air was hot and stale, recycled through a vent that rattled overhead. Tiana felt sweat trickling down her back. The silence was louder than the engine. It was heavy with unsaid threats. She could not take it anymore. She needed to scream or cry or fight, but she just spoke. "Am I under arrest?" she asked. Her voice sounded small and thin in the metal box. "Is that what this is? Did Derek call you? Is this about the sandwich?" It sounded ridiculous the moment the words left her mouth. The United States military did not deploy a tactical team for a stolen turkey sandwich, but her mind was grasping for logic in a situation that had none. She leaned forward, desperate for a reaction. "I paid for that food," Tiana said, her voice rising with panic. "I have the receipt. It was $7. You cannot arrest me for feeding a hungry man. Is that a crime now? Is compassion a national security threat? Tell me why I am here." The colonel finally moved. He did not answer her question. He did not tell her to calm down. He simply reached down to a black tactical case secured at his feet. The sound of the heavy latches clicking open echoed like gunshots in the cramped space. Click. Click. He pulled out a file folder. It was thick, almost 2 inches of paper bound together with a rubber band that had snapped with age. The manila cover was faded and stained with coffee rings and what looked like old, dried blood. He slid it across the metal table that separated them. The friction of the paper against the steel made a dry, rasping sound. Tiana looked down. Stamped across the front in bold, aggressive red ink were words that made her stomach turn over. Project Omega. Beneath that, a single word in black block text that had been struck through with a thick black line. Redacted. "Open it," the colonel said. His voice was gravel. Tiana reached out, her fingers trembling as she touched the rough paper. She flipped the cover open. She expected to see a criminal record. She expected to see mugshots of a vagrant arrested for loitering or public intoxication. She expected to see the tragic history of a man who had lost his way. What she saw stopped her heart. It was a photograph. An 8x10 glossy print, black and white but sharp as a knife. It showed a formal event. A state dinner maybe, or a diplomatic summit. In the center of the frame stood the President of the United States. Not the current one, but one from decades ago, a face she recognized from history books. And standing right next to him was a man in a tuxedo. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and radiating power. He was not bowing. He was not smiling. He was leaning in, whispering something into the president's ear, and the president of the free world looked terrified. Tiana looked closer at the man in the tuxedo. The jawline was sharp. The hair was dark and thick. But the eyes were unmistakable. They were sharp, intelligent, and piercing. They were the same eyes that had looked at her from a pile of dirty blankets at the bus stop for 6 months. Elias. "This is impossible," Tiana whispered. She ran her thumb over the face in the photo. "He is homeless. He has nothing. He sleeps in a cardboard box." The colonel leaned forward, his shadow falling over the file. "He does not sleep in a box because he has to miss Ross. He sleeps there because it is the only place he can hide. You think you were feeding a beggar. You were keeping the most dangerous intelligence asset in American history alive. And now, thanks to you, he has been found." The armored vehicle came to a halt with a heavy mechanical hiss that vibrated through the metal floor. Tiana braced herself as the rear doors swung open, expecting to see the chaotic bustle of a police precinct or the gray concrete of a holding cell. Instead, she was met with silence and blinding white light. They were parked inside an underground loading dock that looked more like a high-tech laboratory than a garage. The floors were sealed concrete, spotless enough to eat off of, and the air smelled of ozone and aggressive sterilization. "This way, Miss Ross," the colonel said. He did not touch her, but his presence was a wall guiding her forward. Tiana stepped out, her legs feeling like jelly. Two soldiers flanked her, instantly falling into step with a precision that was terrifying. They walked toward a bank of elevators that looked like sheets of black glass. There were no buttons. The colonel simply placed his palm against a scanner, and the door slid open with a whisper. They rose in silence. Tiana watched the numbers tick up on a digital display. B4, B3, B2, lobby. When the doors opened, the breath caught in her throat. This was not a hospital. It was a fortress disguised as a sanctuary. The lobby was a cavernous space of Italian marble and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out onto a private courtyard. There were no crying children, no crowded waiting rooms, just silence and men in suits whispering in corners. And then she saw him, standing near the reception desk, laughing at something a man in a white coat had just said was Derek Sterling. He looked perfectly at home here. His gray suit was tailored to within an inch of its life, and his hair was slicked back with that expensive gel that smelled like cedar and arrogance. He was holding a leather portfolio, likely signing a contract to supply this very facility with his company's overpriced medical equipment. Tiana tried to look away to make herself small behind the Colonel's broad back, but it was too late. Derek turned, his smile still lingering on his face, and then it froze. His eyes widened. He looked from Tiana to the Colonel to the two armed soldiers standing behind her. And then the smile returned, but it was different now. It was sharper, crueler. It was the smile of a man who had just been proven right. "Well, well, well," Derek said, his voice booming across the quiet lobby. He stepped away from the doctor and walked toward them, blocking their path. "I knew the universe had a sense of humor, but this is poetic justice." Tiana kept her head high, though her insides were twisting into knots. "Please, just keep walking," she prayed silently. But Derek was not going to let this moment pass. He looked Tiana up and down, his gaze lingering on her cheap coat and the way she held her hands together to stop them from shaking. "I have to say, Tiana, I expected you to end up in the back of a squad car, but a military escort." Derek whistled low and mocking. "You really aimed high, didn't you? What was it this time?" "The sandwiches were not enough, so you moved on to the pharmacy cabinet, selling prescription meds on the side. Or maybe you tried to access the secure servers. I told security you were a risk." He turned his attention to the Colonel, his tone shifting to a conspiratorial man-to-man confidence that made Tiana's skin crawl. "You are doing the city a favor, officer. I fired this girl yesterday. Caught her stealing company property. She played the victim, of course. Cried about feeding the homeless. But we both know how it starts. First, it is a sandwich. Then it is a laptop. Then they are selling patient data. It is a cultural thing, a lack of respect for ownership." Tiana felt the heat rise up her neck, burning her cheeks. He was talking about her like she was a contagion, like she was not standing right there. He was stripping away her dignity layer by layer, painting her as a criminal to the very people who held her fate in their hands. She wanted to scream. She wanted to tell him that she was here because she had saved a life, not because she had stolen a stapler. But she bit her tongue. She would not give him the satisfaction of a reaction. Derek stepped closer to the Colonel, ignoring the soldiers who had tightened their grip on their rifles. "If you need a witness statement for the prosecution, my legal team is at your disposal. Sterling Medical Solutions has zero tolerance for criminal behavior. We would be happy to help put her away for a long time. It is the only way these people learn." The lobby had gone deadly silent. The receptionist had stopped typing. The doctor Derek had been talking to was watching with wide eyes. Tiana felt tears pricking at the corners of her eyes, not from sadness, but from pure white-hot rage. She waited for the handcuffs. She waited for the Colonel to nod and agree with this man who wore prejudice like a designer tie. The Colonel stopped walking. He turned his head slowly, violently slow, until he was looking directly at Derek. He did not blink. His face was a mask of absolute granite indifference. He looked at Derek not with anger, but with the kind of detached disinterest a lion might have for a buzzing fly. He looked at the expensive suit, the eager, cruel smile, the hand half extended for a handshake. And then he looked through him. "Move," the Colonel said. It was one word, spoken softly, but it carried the weight of a tank rolling over crushed stone. Derek's smile faltered. His hand dropped. He blinked, confused by the lack of camaraderie. "Excuse me," Derek stammered, his confidence cracking. "I am just trying to help you. I know her type. She is trash." The colonel did not escalate. He did not shout. He simply stepped forward, invading Derek's personal space with a terrifying controlled aggression. The air temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Derek stumbled back, his heels clicking on the marble, his face draining of color. "You are blocking my path," the colonel said, "and you are boring me." He turned his back on Derek, as if the man had ceased to exist. He looked at Tiana, and for the first time his expression softened, just a fraction. Not a smile, but an acknowledgement. A signal that he saw the difference between the man in the suit and the woman in the cheap coat. "Walk, Miss Ross," the colonel commanded. Tiana took a breath and stepped forward. She walked past Derek, who was standing with his mouth open, looking small and foolish in the middle of the vast lobby. She did not look at him. She kept her eyes forward on the double doors ahead, leaving him in the wake of her silence. She was walking into the unknown, but for the first time that day, she walked with her head held high. The colonel stopped in front of a heavy steel door at the end of the corridor. There were no windows here, no friendly nurse's station, just a keypad and a retinal scanner. He leaned forward and a beam of red light swept across his eye. The lock disengaged with a heavy mechanical clunk that echoed in the silence. He stepped back and gestured for Tiana to enter. "You have 5 minutes, Miss Ross. Make them count." Tiana stepped across the threshold and the door hissed shut behind her, sealing her in. The room was freezing. It was kept at a temperature meant to preserve biological samples, not to comfort a human being. In the center of the room, surrounded by a forest of beeping monitors and humming machines, lay a bed. And in that bed lay Elias. He looked smaller than he had on the street. Without his layers of wool coats and scarves, he looked fragile, like a bird with broken wings. His skin was a terrible shade of gray, pulling tight against his cheekbones. Tubes ran into his arms, his chest, his nose. The steady rhythmic beep of the heart monitor was the only sign that he was still fighting. Tiana felt a sob catch in her throat. She walked to the bedside, her legs heavy. This was the man who had shared his stories with her, the man who had protected her in his own way. Now he was helpless. "Elias," she whispered, reaching out to touch his hand. It was cold, so cold. His eyelids fluttered. It took a moment for him to focus, but when he saw her, a spark of recognition lit up those sharp blue eyes. "Tiana," he rasped. His voice was barely a breath. "I knew you would come." Tiana gripped his hand, trying to warm it with her own. "Why are you here, Elias? The doctor's outside. Derek. They act like you are some kind of criminal." The colonel showed me a photo. "You were with the president. Who are you really?" Elias tried to smile, but it turned into a grimace of pain. "I was a ghost, Tiana. A ghost who knew too much." He coughed, a dry rattling sound that shook the bed frame. "They found me. After all these years, I slipped up. I stayed in one place too long. I stayed because of the sandwiches. Because of the kindness. It was a mistake." "What do you mean?" Tiana asked, leaning closer. "I am not sick, girl," Elias whispered, his eyes darting to the camera in the corner of the room. "I was poisoned. A slow-acting neurotoxin. Flavorless. Odorless. They slipped it into my water bottle 3 days ago. That is why I was coughing. That is why I fell. It was not the winter. It was them." Tiana felt a chill run down her spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. "Them. You mean Sterling?" "Derek. Derek is just a puppet." Elias set his grip on her hand, tightening with surprising strength. "He is the face of the monster. His company, Sterling Medical. They are trying to seize control of the Omega network. It is a financial system, Tiana. A military ledger worth trillions. It funds black ops. It funds wars before they happen. I built the back door. I hold the master key. If they get it, they do not just get money. They get the power to topple governments." Tiana stared at him, her mind reeling. The homeless man who thanked her for peanut butter was the architect of a global shadow economy. It was too much to process. But looking at the desperation in his eyes, she knew it was true. They brought me here to save me. Elias continued, his voice fading. Or so they say. But they are just keeping me alive long enough to extract the code. Once they have it, I am a dead man. And Derek, he is here to make sure the transfer happens. He tried to sit up, his breath coming in shallow gasps. He reached for the thin hospital gown around his neck. His fingers fumbled with a fraying piece of dirty string that Tiana had seen 100 times. She always thought it was just trash he wore for luck. He pulled it until it snapped. Sliding off the string was not a charm or a religious medal. It was a small, battered USB drive. It looked ancient, wrapped in electrical tape and grime. "Take it," Elias hissed, pressing the cold metal into her palm. "Close your hand. Hide it." Tiana closed her fist, feeling the sharp edges of the drive bite into her skin. "What do I do with this?" "You run," Elias said. "You are the only one who looked at me and saw a human being, Tiana. Everyone else saw a bum. A statistic. You saw a soul. That makes you the only person I can trust. This drive, it is the key. It is everything they want. Without it, they can never access the core system." The monitor began to beep faster. Elias's heart rate was spiking. He was running out of time. "Do not trust the colonel." Elias warned, his eyes burning with intensity. "Do not trust the doctors. And never, ever trust the military. They are all parts of the same machine. You have to get this to the contact. There is a name on the drive. Find him." The door behind Tiana hissed open. "Time is up." "Miss Ross, the colonel." His voice boomed from the doorway. Elias slumped back against the pillows, the energy draining out of him instantly. He looked at Tiana one last time, his eyes pleading. "Remember what I told you," he whispered so low only she could hear. "Small things are not small. Now go." Tiana shoved the USB drive into her pocket, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She stood up and turned to face the colonel, trying to mask the terror on her face. She was not just a medical coder anymore. She was a carrier, and she was standing in a room full of wolves. The steady beep of the heart monitor changed in an instant. It did not fade or stutter. It simply turned into a high-pitched, continuous scream that filled the small room. Flatline. The sound drilled into Tiana's skull, paralyzing her. Elias's eyes rolled back in his head and his body went rigid before slumping back against the mattress. "Code Blue Room 404. The mechanical voice blared from the ceiling speakers. Red lights began to flash in the corridor. Before Tiana could even scream his name, the door burst open. A team of doctors and nurses in hazmat-style protective gear swarmed the room. They moved with a terrifying, violent efficiency. One ripped the gown open, exposing Elias's frail chest. Another charged the defibrillator paddles. Clear. The body jerked violently off the bed. Tiana was frozen, watching the only friend she had in the world die on a table surrounded by strangers. Then a hand clamped onto her shoulder like a vice. It was the colonel. He was not looking at the doctors. He was looking at his wrist communicator, which was flashing a silent alert. "You have to go," the colonel hissed in her ear. His voice was low and urgent, completely different from the stone-cold commander he had been minutes ago. He spun Tiana around, breaking her stare from the bed. "But he is dying," Tiana cried, struggling against his grip. "We have to help him." "He is gone," the colonel said, shoving her toward the door. "And you will be next if you stay. This facility is not secure. There are eyes everywhere. Go, run." He pushed her out into the hallway and pointed toward the main atrium. "Do not stop. Do not speak to anyone. Just run." Tiana did not ask questions. The terror in the colonel's eyes was answer enough. She sprinted down the sterile white corridor, her boots skidding on the polished floor. She could hear the chaos of the code blue fading behind her, replaced by the sound of her own ragged breathing. She reached the end of the hall and burst through the double doors into the lobby, desperate for the exit, desperate for the cold air of the street. She never made it to the glass doors. Derek Sterling stepped out from behind a marble pillar, blocking her path. He was not alone this time. Two private security contractors stood behind him, arms crossed, looking massive and menacing. Derek was not smiling. The arrogant charm was gone, replaced by a cold, predatory hunger. He held a phone to his ear, listening for a second before snapping it shut. "Going somewhere, Tiana?" he asked, stepping in front of her. "Move!" "Derek!" Tiana gasped, backing away. Her hand instinctively went to her pocket where the sharp edges of the USB drive dug into her leg. Derek saw the movement. His eyes narrowed. "My sources upstairs tell me the old man just checked out. And right before the end, the cameras saw him hand you something. A little souvenir." He took a step forward, forcing Tiana back against the wall. He held out his hand, palm up. "Give it here, Tiana. You are out of your depth. You are just a little mouse, scurrying around in a trap built for lions. Give me the drive and I might let you walk out of here alive. Don't make me take it from you." Tiana did not hand over the drive. She looked at Derek's outstretched hand, and then she looked at the heavy fire alarm lever on the wall next to her. It was a gamble, a desperate, stupid gamble. But it was all she had. She lunged not at Derek, but at the wall. Her fist slammed into the lever, shattering the plastic cover. The klaxon screamed, a piercing wail that echoed off the marble floors. "Get her!" Derek roared, lunging forward. But the split second of confusion was enough. Tiana ducked under the grasp of the nearest security guard and bolted. She did not run toward the glass doors. She knew that was a death sentence. There were armed men outside, and the perimeter would be locked down in seconds. Instead, she turned and sprinted toward the service corridor behind the reception desk. "Where is she going?" Derek shouted, his voice echoing over the alarm. "That is a dead end. Corner her." Tiana knew something they did not. She had spent 5 years coding the infrastructure of hospitals just like this one. She knew that every modern medical facility had a central nervous system, a server room. And she knew exactly where it was because she had seen the blueprints on the wall of the elevator during the ride down. B2, sub-level maintenance. She hit the stairwell door with her shoulder flying down the concrete steps 2 at a time. Her breath burned in her lungs. Above her, she heard the heavy boots of the security team clattering against the metal stairs. They were fast, stronger. But they were thinking like soldiers. Tiana was thinking like a coder. She burst onto the B2 landing. The air here was freezing, humming with the sound of massive cooling fans. She scanned the corridor until she saw it. A heavy steel door marked "Authorized Personnel Only." Server Farm 1. She swiped her old employee badge. It should have been deactivated. Derek had fired her yesterday. But she knew that HR systems usually took 48 hours to fully purge access codes from the sublevels. It was a bureaucratic lag she had complained about for years. Today, it saved her life. The light on the pad turned green. Tiana threw the door open and slammed it shut behind her, engaging the manual deadbolt just as a heavy body slammed into the metal from the other side. "Open this door!" "Tiana?" Derek's voice was muffled but furious. "You have nowhere to go." Tiana ignored him. She was standing in a forest of black towers. Blinking blue and green lights surrounded her. The hum was deafening here. This was the brain of Sterling Medical. She ran to the main terminal console. Her hands were shaking violently, but her mind was crystal clear. She pulled the dirty tape-wrapped USB drive from her pocket. She did not know how to decrypt Elias's files. She did not know how to hack a military-grade firewall. But she knew medical protocols. She knew the language of emergencies. She plugged the USB into the terminal. The screen flashed red, detecting an unauthorized device. Perfect. She opened the emergency broadcast command line. As a medical coder, she knew the specific codes that triggered automatic federal responses. She was not going to call the police. The police answered to Derek. She was going to call the one entity that even Sterling Medical feared, the CDC. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. She did not type a distress signal. She typed a diagnostic code. ICD-10, code B96.8, coupled with a facility critical failure status. And then she attached a file from the USB, not knowing what it was, only knowing it was encrypted and looked like foreign data. She flagged the facility as a level 4 biohazard zone. Contagion breach. Deadly pathogen. She hit enter. For a second, nothing happened. Then the room turned red. The hum of the fans stopped. A new alarm started. It was not the high-pitched wail of a fire alarm. It was a low, resonant thrum that vibrated in her chest. A robotic voice filled the building. Biohazard threat detected. Containment protocol initiated. Sealing all sectors. On the security monitors above the console, Tiana watched the chaos unfold. In the hallway outside the server room, massive steel blast doors began to descend from the ceiling. Derek and his guards looked up in horror. They tried to run for the elevators, but the doors slammed shut, sealing the corridor. They were trapped. The ventilation system shut down to prevent airborne spread. The elevators locked. The entire building had just turned into a hermetically sealed tomb. Derek slammed his fist against the reinforced glass of the server room window, his face twisted in a silent scream of rage. He was mouthing words Tiana could not hear, but she knew what they were. He was trapped in the hallway, and she was locked in the server room. But Tiana was not planning to stay. She turned to the back of the room. Behind the racks of servers near the cooling units was a large metal grate. The air intake. She knew that in a biohazard lockdown, the system automatically diverted airflow to emergency filtration shafts to scrub the environment. That meant the intake fans would stop spinning to seal the vents. She grabbed a heavy fire extinguisher from the wall and smashed the padlock on the grate. It took 3 hits before the metal gave way. She pulled the grate aside, revealing a dark, narrow tunnel that smelled of dust and ozone. It was tight, claustrophobic, but it led to the surface. It was the maintenance access for the cooling towers. Tiana looked back at the window. Derek was sliding down the wall, defeated, trapped by his own company's safety protocols. Tiana looked at him one last time. She touched the glass. "You wanted to keep the system clean, Derek," she whispered. "Now you can sit in it." She climbed into the vent, pulling the grate shut behind her. She was in the walls now, a ghost in the machine, and she was climbing toward the light. The service tunnel exit opened into the alley behind her apartment building. Tiana clawed her way out, coughing up dust and wiping grease from her forehead. She looked like a fugitive. She felt like a fugitive. But she needed one thing before she disappeared. Under the floorboard in her bedroom was a small metal box. It contained her passport, $300 in emergency cash, and the dog tags her brother Marcus had worn every day of his service. She could not leave them behind with Jessica. She would not. She climbed the fire escape, avoiding the front entrance. Her window was unlocked. She slid it up and tumbled onto the familiar carpet of her small bedroom. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. Tiana grabbed her backpack and pried up the loose floorboard. She shoved the metal box inside, along with a few changes of clothes. She was ready. She turned to the bedroom door, her hand on the knob ready to slip out as silently as she had arrived. But the door swung open before she could touch it. Surprise flashed across Jessica's face, but it was quickly replaced by a smug, victorious smirk. She was not alone. Behind her, filling the narrow hallway with their bulk and their utility belts, stood 2 uniformed police officers. "There she is," Jessica shrieked, pointing a manicured finger at Tiana. "I told you she would come back. She is erratic, officers. She broke in through the window. Look at her. Look at the state of her. She is clearly on something." Officer Miller, a stocky man with a buzz cut, stepped into the room. His hand rested casually but intentionally on the grip of his taser. "Ma'am, let me see your hands. Step away from the bag." Tiana froze. She raised her hands slowly, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "I live here," Tiana said, her voice steady despite the fear. "My name is on the lease. I did not break in. I used the window because I lost my keys." "She is lying," Jessica cut in, her voice trembling with a performance worthy of an Oscar. "I kicked her out days ago. She has been stalking me. She stole my diamond earrings, and now she is back to steal more to pay for her habit." "Officer, please. I am terrified for my daughter." The second officer, a younger man, stepped forward and grabbed Tiana's wrist, spinning her around. He pinned her arm behind her back. "You are under arrest for breaking and entering and larceny. You have the right to remain silent." The cold steel of the handcuffs brushed against her skin. Tiana looked at Jessica. Her sister-in-law was not looking at the officers. She was looking at Tiana, and in her eyes there was no fear. There was only hate. Pure, unadulterated hate. Jessica was using the police as her personal eviction service, using the color of Tiana's skin as a weapon to weaponize the law against her. "Wait," Tiana said. Her voice was not loud, but it was sharp enough to make the officer pause. She did not struggle. She did not pull away. She just turned her head to lock eyes with Jessica. "Tell them the truth, Jessica." Jessica crossed her arms. "I just did." "You are a thief." "No," Tiana said. "You called the police because you know that when they see a black woman in a dirty coat and a white woman crying, they do not ask for receipts. You called them because you want me gone, and you were too cowardly to wait until the end of the month." She leaned forward, ignoring the officer tightening his grip on her arm. "You do not hate me because I am poor Jessica. And you do not hate me because you think I stole your cheap jewelry. You hate me because every time you look at my face, you see him. You see Marcus." Jessica flinched. Her perfectly powdered face cracked. "You see the black husband you regret marrying?" Tiana continued, her words pouring out like hot lava. "You see the mistake you think you made. And worst of all, you hate me because I remind you that your daughter is black too. You are trying to scrub the color out of her life, trying to bleach her world white. But as long as I am here, you cannot pretend she is just like you. I am the living proof of who her father was, and you cannot stand it." "Shut up," Jessica hissed. Her voice lost its tremble. It was venomous now. "Get her out of here, officer. She is disturbing the peace." The officer pulled Tiana's arm up painfully. "Let's go. We can discuss your family drama downtown." Tiana laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "I do not think so. Officer, before you take me in, you might want to ask Mrs. Sterling about the income statements she filed last month." Jessica went rigid. "What are you talking about?" "I was a medical coder," Tiana said. "I processed the claims for the region, including yours. I saw the paperwork you filed for Zoe. You are claiming full disability benefits for a child who plays varsity soccer. And you are claiming single household poverty status to get state-assisted health care while sitting on a $500,000 life insurance payout from the military." The room went deadly silent. The older officer Miller looked at Jessica. His hand moved away from his taser. He looked at the expensive furniture, the designer clothes, and then back at Tiana. "Is that true?" Ma'am Miller asked Jessica. "It is a lie," Jessica stammered, but her face was pale. "She is making it up. I have the screenshots on my cloud drive," Tiana lied smoothly. "Federal welfare fraud. Insurance fraud. That is 5 to 10 years in federal prison, Jessica. And I am pretty sure Child Protective Services would have a lot to say about where Zoe goes while you are serving time." Jessica looked at Tiana with pure terror. She knew Tiana worked in the system. She knew Tiana was smart. She did not know if Tiana actually had the files, but the risk was too high. Jessica turned to the officers, her smile brittle and fake. "You know what, officers? I think I might have misplaced the earrings. And if she agrees to leave quietly, I do not want to press charges. It is a family matter after all. We do not need to waste your time." Officer Miller looked between them. He smelled the lie. He knew exactly what was happening. He released Tiana's arm and uncuffed her. He looked at Jessica with disgust. "If you call us out here for a false report again, lady, you are the one taking a ride." He signaled his partner. "Let's go." The door closed behind them. Tiana stood in the hallway rubbing her wrist. Jessica was shaking, but she did not say a word. She just stepped aside, shrinking against the wall, terrified of the woman she had tried to destroy. Tiana did not look at her. She grabbed her backpack. She walked to the door and opened it. She did not say goodbye. She just walked out into the night, leaving Jessica alone in her perfect apartment with her lies and her ghosts. Tiana was homeless again, but she was free, and she had a mission to finish. The central branch of the public library was a fortress of silence in the middle of a chaotic city. It was the only place left where a person could exist without paying a fee. Tiana walked through the metal detectors, her head down, pulling her hood low over her face. She looked like just another exhaustion casualty, seeking warmth among the stacks. The security guard, a heavy-set man who looked like he was counting the minutes until his shift ended, barely glanced at her. Tiana made her way to the back of the second floor, past the rows of history books and the sleeping patrons who had nowhere else to go. She found a computer terminal in the corner, tucked away behind a pillar. It was an old machine with a sticky keyboard and a monitor that flickered, but it was connected to the internet. That was all she needed. She sat down and took a deep breath. Her hands were still trembling. She pulled the battered USB drive from her pocket. It felt heavy warm from being pressed against her skin. This was it. The reason Elias had died. The reason she was a fugitive. She looked around one last time, checking for cameras, checking for Derek, checking for the police. The coast was clear. She plugged the drive into the USB port. The screen flickered. A dialog box popped up. Drive encrypted. Enter password. Tiana stared at the blinking cursor. Elias had not given her a password. He had only said she was the only one who saw him. She closed her eyes, trying to remember every conversation they had ever shared. Every morning coffee, every story about the war. What would a man like Elias use to lock away the truth? She typed in Omega. Access denied. She typed in President. Access denied. She typed in Freedom. Access denied. She leaned back, running her hands through her hair. Think, Tiana. Think. He said small things are not small. She typed in small things. Access denied. Panic began to rise in her chest. She had 3 attempts left before the drive likely wiped itself. That was standard protocol for classified data. She looked at the drive again. It was wrapped in dirty electrical tape, but underneath she could see a faint scratching on the metal casing. It was a date. 11/12/57. She typed the numbers. Access denied. 1 attempt left. Tiana closed her eyes and saw Elias' face on the hospital bed. She heard his rasping voice. You are the only one who didn't look away. She remembered the first day she met him. He had been starving. She had given him a sandwich. He had asked her name. She had told him, and he had said something strange. He said, Tiana means princess, but you fight like a queen. She typed in queen. The screen went black. For a second, Tiana thought she had destroyed it. Then a green command line appeared. Decryption complete. Accessing root directory. Folders began to populate the screen. Hundreds of them. Tiana clicked on the first folder labeled Project Omega Financials. She expected to see bank accounts. She expected to see money laundering, and she did. There were transfers of millions of dollars from the Department of Defense to shell companies owned by Sterling Medical Solutions. But as she scrolled down, she realized the money was not the crime. The money was the payment for the crime. She opened the next folder labeled Clinical Trials Off Book. The first image that loaded made Tiana cover her mouth to stifle a scream. It was a photo of a man. He was emaciated, covered in sores, lying on a cot in what looked like a warehouse. His eyes were vacant. The caption read, Subject 042, deceased. Cause of death organ failure due to compound omega exposure. Tiana clicked through the files. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a war drum. It was a catalog of horrors. There were videos, dozens of them. She clicked on one. The camera angle was shaky handheld. It showed a line of men and women. They looked like the people she passed on the street every day. Veterans, the homeless, the mentally ill. They were lining up at a van marked with the Sterling Medical logo. A man in a white coat was handing out cups. Tiana recognized the voice behind the camera. It was Derek. Just drink it, Derek. His voice sneered from the computer speakers. It is just a vitamin supplement. You want the $20 or not? The video cut to a montage of medical charts. Tiana's eyes scanned the data. She understood medical coding. She knew what she was looking at. This was not a vitamin. It was an experimental performance enhancer, a combat drug designed to eliminate fear and pain in soldiers. But it had side effects, terrible side effects. Rage, psychosis, brain hemorrhaging. And Sterling Medical had been testing it on the homeless population of Chicago for 10 years. They were not treating them. They were using them as lab rats because nobody would miss them. Nobody would ask questions if a homeless veteran died in an alley. Tiana found a folder named Subject 0. She opened it. It was Elias. The file contained medical logs going back 5 years. They had not just poisoned him recently. They had been dosing him for years, tracking his resistance. He was the only one who had survived the initial trials. That was why he was so valuable. His blood held the antibodies, the answer to stabilizing the drug. That was why they hunted him. That was why Derek had been at the hospital. They did not want to save him. They wanted to harvest him. Tiana felt tears streaming down her face. She was looking at a genocide disguised as charity. And Derek Sterling was the architect. She reached into her pocket to grab a tissue, and her fingers brushed against her phone. She had turned it off hours ago. The colonel had warned her. But she needed to record this. She needed to take pictures of the screen in case she couldn't email the files. The library computer blocked external uploads. She needed her phone. It was a mistake, a terrible amateur mistake. She powered on the phone. It buzzed instantly. Messages flooded in, missed calls from Jessica, alerts from her bank, and then a single text message from an unknown number. It arrived 10 seconds after she turned the phone on. They had been pinging her signal, waiting for a blip. Tiana opened the text. Her blood froze in her veins. The image was grainy but unmistakable. It was a photo of an elderly woman sitting in a wheelchair. She was staring out a window, her silver hair neatly combed. It was her mother, Mrs. Ross. She was in the nursing home where Tiana paid $2,000 a month to keep her safe. But in the reflection of the window behind her, Mother stood a figure, a man in a suit. He was holding a phone, taking the picture. Tiana read the text below the image. She looks peaceful, Tiana. It would be a tragedy if her oxygen tank malfunctioned. The elderly are so fragile. Respiratory failure is a common cause of death. You have 30 minutes. Bring the drive to the Sterling manufacturing plant on 4th Street. Come alone. Or Mom stops breathing. Tick-tock. Tiana dropped the phone. It clattered onto the desk, loud in the quiet library. People turned to look. But Tiana did not see them. She only saw her mother. She only saw the monster who had killed Elias and was now coming for the only family she had left. She looked at the screen. The evidence was all there. Enough to send Derek to prison for 1,000 years. But if she used it, her mother died. Tiana pulled the USB drive from the computer. The screen went black. She grabbed her phone and shoved it into her pocket. She stood up. Her legs felt heavy like they were made of lead, but her mind was cold. Sharp. She was not going to run anymore. Derek wanted the drive. He wanted a meeting. She would give him one. But she was not going to bring him the surrender he expected. She remembered what Elias had said. You fight like a queen. Tiana walked out of the library into the cold night air. She hailed a taxi. To 4th Street, she told the driver, and hurry, I have a monster to kill. The rain on the rooftop of the Sterling Medical Building was not just water. It felt like bullets of ice driving into Tiana's skin. The wind howled around the helipad, whipping her hair across her face and stinging her eyes, but she did not blink. She stood 10 feet from the edge, her back to the drop. In front of her, Derek Sterling stood with his hands in his pockets, looking relaxed and utterly victorious. 2 of his private security guards flanked him, their black raincoats glistening under the floodlights. They looked like reapers, waiting for a command. You made good time, Tiana, Derek shouted over the roar of the wind. I appreciate that. It shows you know your place. Now give me the drive and I will make the call to the nursing home. Your mother can sleep soundly tonight. Tiana reached into her pocket. Her fingers closed around the USB drive. It was small, insignificant, a piece of plastic and metal that cost maybe $10 at a store. But inside it was the soul of Elias Thorne. Inside it was the scream of every veteran Derek had murdered in the name of profit. She pulled it out and held it up. The floodlight caught the silver casing, making it shine like a beacon. Bring it here, Derek said, extending his hand. His eyes were hungry. He was not looking at her. He was looking at his future. He was looking at the billions of dollars he would make once the evidence was destroyed. Tiana took a step forward, then another. She saw the smirk widen on Derek's face. He thought he had won. He thought fear was the only language she understood. He forgot that she had spent 6 months talking to a man who had nothing and still found a way to give everything. "You said my kindness was a weakness," Tiana yelled, her voice cutting through the storm. "You said caring about people like Elias made me soft." "It did." Derek laughed. "It got you fired. It got you hunted. And now it has brought you here to beg for your mother's life. Kindness is a disease, Tiana, and I am the cure." Tiana looked at the drive one last time. She squeezed it so hard the sharp edges cut into her palm. "You are wrong," she said. "Kindness is not a weakness. It is the only thing that scares monsters like you because you cannot control it." She did not hand him the drive. She threw it. But she did not throw it to him. She threw it straight down onto the concrete pavers at her feet. She raised her heavy boot and stomped down with every ounce of rage she possessed. Crack! The sound was sickeningly loud. Plastic shattered. The silicon chip inside crunched into dust. She ground her heel into the debris, destroying the only copy of the evidence. Derek's scream was primal. "No!" He lunged at her, his face twisted into a mask of pure demonic fury. He forgot his guards. He forgot the rain. He only saw his empire turning to dust under the boot of a medical coder. Grab her, throw her off the roof. The guards rushed forward. Tiana braced herself, ready to fight, ready to die if she had to, but she never felt their hands. A sound tore through the sky above them. It was a rhythmic thumping that vibrated in Tiana's chest. Thwoop, thwoop, thwoop. A blinding white light exploded from the clouds, turning the night into day. The wind from the rotor blades hit the roof like a hurricane, knocking Derek off his feet. A black military helicopter hovered above the helipad. It was not a police chopper. It was a ghost hawk, sleek and terrifying. A winch lowered rapidly. A platform descended. Sitting on it, strapped into a tactical chair, was a figure wrapped in blankets. Derek scrambled back, shielding his eyes from the light. "Who is that?" he screamed. "Who is that?" The platform touched down. The figure pulled back the hood of his coat. It was Elias. He was pale, he was weak, but he was alive, and he was holding a microphone. The code blue was Theater Derek. Elias's voice boomed from the helicopter's PA system, amplifying his rasp over the storm. "I took a tetrodotoxin pill to stop my heart. It is an old spy trick. You really should check for a pulse yourself next time instead of trusting machines I programmed." Derek stared at the old man, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. You are dead. I saw you die." "I have been dead for 20 years, Elias said. "It is the only way I could see who the rats were." The helicopter touched down and soldiers poured out. Real soldiers. Military police with MP emblazoned on their helmets. They did not aim at Tiana. They aimed at Derek. Elias unbuckled his straps. He did not stand, but he sat tall, his dignity filling the space. "You wanted the master key, Derek. You thought it was on that drive. You fool. I am the key. The biometrics are in my blood. The codes are in my mind. That drive was a decoy filled with encrypted gibberish, and you just confessed to murder trying to get it." Tiana looked at the crushed plastic at her feet and then at Elias. He winked at her. A small, almost invisible wink, the same one he used to give her when she brought him extra coffee. The payoff had just begun. Derek struggled to his feet, his expensive suit soaked and ruined. "This is insane," he shouted, pointing a trembling finger at Elias. "You have no authority here. This is private property. I am the CEO of Sterling Medical. You are just a trespassing vagrant. I will have you arrested. I will have you all court-martialed. Do you know who I am?" Elias laughed. It was a deep, rich sound that echoed off the skyscrapers. "Oh, I know who you are, Derek. You are the son of my former partner. You are the greedy little boy who took a company built to save lives and turned it into a slaughterhouse." Elias reached into his jacket and pulled out a document. It was laminated and sealed with a government stamp. "And you clearly did not read the corporate charter very well when you took over," he continued. "You own 40% of Sterling Medical, Derek. The other 60%. The controlling interest. It belongs to a blind trust called the Omega Fund. Derek froze. I know that. The fund is dormant. The trustees are anonymous. Not anonymous, Elias said. Just absent. I am the Omega Fund, Derek. I founded this company before you were born. I went underground to investigate where the money was going. I lived on the street to see how your trials were affecting the victims. I sat on that bench for 6 months, freezing and starving, while you walked past me in your Italian shoes. Elias leaned forward into the microphone, his voice turning to steel. You fired Miss Ross yesterday because she gave away a $3 sandwich. You said it was theft. You said it showed a lack of character. Well, Derek, today I am returning the favor. As the majority shareholder and chairman of the board, I am removing you from your position, effective immediately. Derek shook his head, backing away toward the edge of the roof. You cannot do that. The board will never support a homeless man. They already have, Elias said. The board has been watching a live stream of this entire encounter. They saw you threaten an employee. They saw you admit to the trials. You are not just fired, Derek. You are finished. You lost $3 billion in market capitalization in the last 10 minutes. That is a lot of sandwiches. Major, secure him. The military police moved in. Derek tried to run, but he slipped on the wet concrete. 2 officers hauled him up by his arms. He kicked and screamed like a child, spitting curses at Tiana and Elias. This is a mistake, he shrieked as they dragged him toward the helicopter. I am Sterling Medical. You are nothing without me. Elias watched him go with cold eyes. We will be better without you, he said softly. Tiana walked over to Elias. The rain was slowing down now, turning into a light mist. She looked at the old man in the wheelchair. He looked exhausted, but his eyes were shining. You lied to me, she said, but there was no anger in her voice, only relief. You said you were a ghost. I was, Elias said, reaching out to take her hand. Until you saw me. 1 week later, the sun was shining through the windows of the apartment, but for the first time in months, it did not feel like a cage. Tiana taped the last box shut. She looked around the small room that had been her home. It was empty now, stripped of the few possessions she owned. In the living room, Jessica was pacing back and forth. She was on the phone, her voice rising in hysteria. What do you mean evicted? That is impossible. I have rights. I have a lease. This is discrimination. She stopped when she saw a man in a sharp gray suit standing in her doorway. He was holding a briefcase. He was not the police. He was worse. He was a corporate lawyer? Mrs. Sterling, the lawyer said, stepping into the room. Please lower your voice. The terms of your lease are quite specific. Jessica hung up the phone and whirled on him. Who are you? Get out of my house. It is not your house, the lawyer said calmly. This apartment building is owned by the Thorn Trust. It is a subsidized housing initiative for military widows, a charitable program. So, what Jessica snapped. My husband was a hero. I deserve this place. You do. The lawyer agreed, opening his briefcase. However, Paragraph 14, Section 2 of your residency agreement clearly states that any tenant found engaging in discriminatory harassment, hate speech, or filing false police reports based on race will have their lease terminated immediately with cause. He pulled out a file. We have the police report from last week. We have the statements from Officer Miller. You weaponized law enforcement against a family member, Mrs. Sterling. That is a violation of our code of conduct. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises. Jessica's face turned a color Tiana had never seen before. It was a mix of ash and purple. You cannot do this, she whispered. I have nowhere to go. I have a child. The trust has arranged for temporary housing, the lawyer said. A shelter on the south side. It is clean, safe, and it will give you a deeper appreciation for the stability you took for granted. Jessica sank onto the sofa, burying her face in her hands. She began to sob, loud, ugly, heaving sobs. Tiana stood by the door with her box. She watched the woman who had tormented her, who had tried to erase her brother's memory, who had called the police to put her in chains. She felt no joy, but she felt justice. Tiana walked over to the dining table. Jessica did not look up. Tiana reached into her bag and pulled out a small plastic container. It was a sandwich, turkey and cheese. She placed it gently on the table next to Jessica's weeping form. "Eat this," Tiana said softly. Jessica looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "What?" "Eat it," Tiana repeated. "You are going to need the energy to find a new house. And besides, it is dangerous to make decisions on an empty stomach." She turned and walked out the door. She did not look back. She walked down the hallway past the neighbors who had watched her be arrested just days ago. They watched her leave now, head held high, carrying her life in a box, but walking like she owned the building. And in a way she did. Or at least she knew the man who did. The elevator ride to the 50th floor of the Thorn Tower was smooth and silent. Tiana smoothed down the front of her new blazer. It was navy blue, perfectly tailored, and it did not have a single fray. The doors opened directly into a corner office that overlooked the entire city of Chicago. The view was breathtaking. From here, the people on the street looked like ants, but Tiana knew they were not. She knew every single one of them had a story. Elias was sitting behind the desk. He looked better. He had gained a little weight and his color had returned, but he still wore a simple wool cardigan instead of a suit. He smiled when she walked in. "Director Ross," he said. "It has a nice ring to it." Tiana walked over to the desk. She ran her hand over the crystal nameplate. "Tiana Ross, CEO, Thorn Veteran Welfare Fund. I still do not know anything about running a foundation." "Elias," she said. "I am a coder. I fix data." "You fixed me," Elias said, rolling his wheelchair around the desk. "You fixed a broken man when the rest of the world walked by. That is the only qualification that matters. We have $5 billion in the endowment, Tiana. Your job is to make sure no veteran ever has to sleep on a piece of cardboard again. Can you do that?" Tiana looked out the window. She saw the bus stop way down below. It was empty now. But soon she would fill this city with shelters, with clinics, with hope. "Yes," she said, "I can do that." She sat down in the leather chair. It was comfortable. It felt right. She opened the top drawer of her new mahogany desk. Inside, next to the sleek company tablet and the gold pens, sat a brown paper bag. She pulled it out and unwrapped it. A peanut butter sandwich. She broke it in half and held a piece out to Elias. "Hungry?" she asked. Elias took it, his eyes crinkling with warmth. "Always." Tiana took a bite. It tasted like victory. It tasted like dignity. Sometimes the only person who sees you when you are invisible is the one who will bring you into the light.